Aidan Voss had always known he was different, smaller, weaker and less skilled than everyone else on Korath, the rocky mining colony at the edge of known space. While others trained in combat or worked with heavy machines, Aidan spent most of his days repairing fragile electronics and reading old star maps, dreaming of places far beyond the barren red wasteland he called home. The colony was tough, hardened by years of conflict and harsh weather, and the people treated him like a child, barely able to protect himself. That all changed one night when the ground trembled beneath his feet and a low, terrible growl echoed across the settlement. A shadow larger than a building moved through the dust clouds, its glowing eyes locking onto the colony's central hub. Panic swept through the streets as alarms blared and screams filled the air. The Xylarian beast had come, a creature whispered about in legends and feared by all, a monster with claws that could tear through steel, a thick hide no weapon could pierce, and a mind sharp enough to outsmart the deadliest hunters. As chaos erupted, Aidan froze for a moment, heart pounding. The strongest fighters rushed to their weapons, but he knew he couldn't win by fighting. Instead, he ran toward the old tunnels beneath the colony, places forgotten and dangerous, but possibly a way to survive. The ground shook again, and behind him the roar of the beast grew louder. As he slipped through narrow passages, the echoes of destruction followed. Then a sudden crash blocked the tunnel entrance, trapping Aidan inside the cold darkness. He could hear heavy footsteps outside and a low growl vibrating through the rock. The beast was searching for him, closing in. Aidan's breath came fast. His body was weak, but his mind raced. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a small device, a beacon meant to signal rescue, useless here if it drew the beast's attention. Then, in the silence, a soft, unexpected sound caught his ear, a whimper, almost human in its sorrow. Curious and terrified, he followed the noise deeper into the tunnels and found the beast itself, wounded and tangled in a collapsed passage. Its massive body strained to move, but a spike of metal had pierced its side. The glowing eyes looked at Aidan, not with rage, but with pain and fear. Without thinking, Aidan used his tools to carefully remove the spike, knowing this was a chance no one else would take. The beast growled low but did not attack. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, two fragile souls trapped in a hostile world. As the distant sounds of the colony's destruction faded, Aidan realized this was no longer about survival alone. Something strange and powerful had begun, something that could change his fate forever. He reached out a trembling hand, and the deadliest creature in the galaxy did something no one had ever seen. It bowed its massive head, as if pledging loyalty to a fragile human. The night air hung heavy with promise and danger, and neither of them knew what path lay ahead, only that they were no longer alone. The dawn was barely breaking when Aidan and the massive Xylarian beast, whom he quietly named Ravok, emerged. From the shadowed tunnels beneath the ruined colony, their unlikely bond, still fresh and fragile, like the early morning light. Aidan's heart raced as he glanced at Ravok's towering form, muscles twitching beneath thick scales, eyes sharp and alert despite the creature's injury. The air around them was thick with tension. Every sound could mean danger, every shadow might hide an enemy. They both knew they couldn't stay long. Hunters, mercenaries, and worse would be searching for the beast, and Aidan could only imagine the bounty placed on Ravok's head. As they moved cautiously through the broken landscape, Aidan's mind spun with questions. Why had the beast trusted him? What did this mean for him, a fragile human with no weapons or training? Despite his fears, a strange feeling of hope stirred within him. Their steps were careful and silent, but the ground trembled occasionally beneath Ravok's weight, drawing unwanted attention. Soon, distant voices echoed, voices of a small group of alien mercenaries, their weapons scanning the horizon for signs of the legendary creature. Aidan's breath caught. He knew they had to hide, Fast. They ducked behind jagged rocks, Ravok curling his massive body low to avoid detection, while Aiden pulled from his pocket a small electronic device he'd scavenged before leaving the new colony, a makeshift translator. With trembling fingers he activated it, hoping to communicate with the mercenaries if needed. As the hunters passed dangerously close, Aiden's mind raced to find a plan. Ravok's growl rumbled softly, a warning, and Aiden realized this creature's instincts were sharper than anyone's weapon. When the mercenaries moved on, he whispered, "We can't outrun them all. We need to be smarter." Ravok lowered his head, almost as if he agreed. They decided to seek refuge on a forgotten outpost, a place marked on Aiden's star maps, but abandoned for decades. The journey would be perilous, through harsh terrain and enemy patrols, but it was their best chance to heal and plan. Along the way, Aiden learned to read Ravok's silent signals, small shifts in posture, low growls, a subtle flick of the tail, and slowly a fragile trust grew between human and beast. The beast's fury was terrifying, but Aiden's calm and patience soothed the creature's wild spirit, yet danger was never far. One evening, while resting near a crater, Aiden heard a strange whistle, an alien language he barely recognized. Suddenly, blaster fire tore through the night sky, forcing them to scatter. Ravok's roar shattered the silence, and Aiden ran toward the sound, finding the beast locked in battle with a sleek hunter drone. With no weapons, Aiden scrambled to find anything to help. His eyes landed on a jagged metal shard nearby. He hurled it with all his might, striking the drone's sensor and causing it to spin out of control and crash. Ravok growled in gratitude, and Aiden felt something shift inside himself, a surge of confidence. But this victory was short-lived. The drone's destruction had drawn more enemies. They were being hunted like prey, and the galaxy seemed ready to close in on them. As they pressed forward, Ravok's wound worsened, slowing their progress and forcing Aiden to act quickly. They reached the ruined outpost just as a patrol caught sight of them. Cornered, Aiden made a desperate choice. He climbed atop Ravok's broad back and, with a shout, commanded the beast to charge. Ravok's massive legs thundered across the rocky terrain, smashing through barriers and scattering enemies. The power of the deadliest beast paired with the fragile human's courage stunned those who witnessed it. After escaping, Aiden realized their bond was more than survival. It was a pact sealed by trust, necessity, and an unspoken promise to protect each other, no matter the cost. But questions remained. What had made Ravok choose him? And would their strange alliance be enough to face the greater dangers lurking in the galaxy's shadows? The journey had only just begun, and the fragile human with the deadliest beast at his side was about to change everything. The stars above flickered cold and distant as Aiden and Ravok pressed deeper into the lawless borderlands, places where no government held power and danger waited behind every crater and canyon. Their flight from hunters and mercenaries was far from over, but the fragile human's mind buzzed with something new, hope mixed with cautious determination. The outcast planets they passed were full of creatures and people who had learned to trust no one. Yet Aiden needed allies if he and Ravok were to survive. But trust was the hardest thing to earn, especially when a towering beast walked beside a weak human, breaking every expectation. Their arrival at a small settlement, called Drethran, was met with cold stares and whispered doubts. The settlers, grizzled survivors of countless wars, eyed Ravok's massive form with suspicion and fear, while Aiden felt the weight of their judgment. To them, he was just a fragile man carrying a dangerous monster, a living threat to their fragile peace. The settlement leader, an alien named Kara, demanded proof that they were not spies or enemies sent to bring ruin. Aiden's hands trembled as he spoke, trying to explain their story without sounding desperate, but words felt weak against the walls of distrust. Ravok's low growl behind him was both a warning and a plea for peace. To gain a foothold, Aiden, agreed to help the settlers fend off a band of raiders who had terrorized Drethran for weeks. It was a gamble, but it was the only way to prove their loyalty. The days that followed tested every ounce of courage and cunning they had. Ravok's power was unmatched in battle, his claws and jaws tearing through enemy ranks with terrifying speed. Yet it was Aiden's quick thinking that saved them more than once, setting traps, directing defenders, and keeping the beast from harming innocent settlers. But not all were convinced. Some saw Ravok only as a weapon, fearing what he could become if turned against them. Others whispered about Aiden's mysterious bond with the creature, questioning if it was real or some trick of the mind. Trust grew in small steps, each one fragile and uncertain, like walking on thin ice. One night, as the settlement slept, a silent alarm shattered the quiet. Raiders had slipped past the defenses, and shadows moved in the darkness, creeping toward the homes of those who had given Aiden and Ravok a chance. The fragile human awoke to Ravok's restless pacing and sharp senses. Together, they raced through the settlement, alerting the people and rallying defenders. The attack was brutal and swift, but with Ravok's raw strength and Aiden's quick commands, the raiders were pushed back. Yet the victory came at a cost: a wounded child, a burned home, and broken trust that would take time to heal. In the quiet aftermath, Aiden sat beside Ravok, their bond deepened by the shared fight and losses. He realized that strength was not just about power or survival. It was about the courage to face fear and the patience to earn trust, even when the odds were against them. But far beyond Drethran, in shadowed halls of power, new threats stirred. Forces who saw the fragile human and the deadliest beast as a danger that must be controlled or destroyed. The trials of trust were only beginning, and the fragile human's path was about to become even more dangerous. The news of Aiden and Ravok's survival and growing influence traveled faster than either of them had imagined, reaching ears they wished to avoid, especially the warlord Sarkhan, a ruthless man who ruled with an iron fist over vast territories and feared no one, not even the galaxy's deadliest beasts. When Sarkhan learned that a fragile human had not only survived, but tamed the legendary Xylarian monster, he saw a threat to his power and a challenge to his pride. He summoned his most skilled hunters and deadly assassins, ordering them to capture or kill the pair at any cost. Meanwhile, Aiden and Ravok knew the danger was closing in. The fragile human's mind worked tirelessly, piecing together plans and alliances from the scraps of information they gathered from whispering traders and hidden contacts. They traveled through dark nebulae and forgotten star systems, always on the move, always hunted. The pressure was relentless, but so was their resolve. On a remote planet filled with jagged cliffs and endless storms, Aiden met with a secret group of rebels who had long resisted Sarkhan's brutal rule. At first, they doubted him. The humans seemed weak and out of place beside Ravok's terrifying form, but Aiden's honesty, courage, and the beast's silent strength earned their respect. Together, they crafted a plan to strike back at Sarkhan's forces, hoping to inspire others to rise against the warlord's tyranny. The days grew darker as Sarkhan's hunters closed the net, attacking supply lines and scouting every settlement that might hide Aiden and Ravok. One night, as a fierce storm raged, their camp was ambushed. Blaster fire lit the sky, and shadows moved like ghosts. Aiden's heart pounded as he leapt to Ravok's side, shouting commands that the beast seemed to understand without words. Ravok charged into the attackers, his roar shaking the very ground beneath them. The battle was brutal and chaotic, but they managed to escape, though not without injury. The fragile human's body ached, and Ravok's wounds deepened, but their spirit burned brighter than ever. The stakes had never been higher, and failure meant death or worse. As they fled into the storm, Aiden knew the coming fight would demand everything he had. his mind, his courage, and the unbreakable bond with the deadliest beast. Somewhere deep inside, he felt a growing fire, a promise that no matter how fragile he seemed, he was ready to face the warlord's challenge and change the fate of the galaxy forever. The cold void of space surrounded the massive asteroid fortress, where warlord Sarkhan had built his empire, a place where shadows hid deadly weapons and danger waited in every corridor. But Aiden and Ravok knew that this was the moment they had been preparing for, the final fight that would decide not only their fate, but the fate of countless worlds crushed under Sarkhan's rule. With a ragtag alliance of rebels and outcasts, Aiden planned the assault with careful precision, understanding that brute force alone would not win the day, and Ravok, despite his wounds, stood as an unstoppable force ready to tear through steel and flesh alike. As they approached the fortress, tension filled the air, and every second felt like a countdown to disaster or victory. The rebels moved silently through the shadowed tunnels, disabling traps and neutralizing guards, while Aiden used his knowledge of the base's layout to avoid patrols and reach the heart of Sarkhan's command center. The deafening roar of Ravok echoed through the halls as he smashed through walls and enemies, his massive claws leaving destruction in their wake. But even his strength could not stop the relentless tide of soldiers and automated defense systems programmed to kill without mercy. In the chaos, Aiden faced Sarkhan, a towering man in battle armor with cold eyes and a cruel smile, who wielded power and experience like weapons of their own. The duel between fragile human and hardened warlord tested everything Aiden had learned: his speed, his mind, and the bond with Ravok, whose timely arrival in the fight saved Aiden more than once from deadly blows. Each moment stretched taut with suspense as Aiden outwitted Sarkhan's traps and used the warlord's own arrogance against him, while Ravok tore apart enemies that stood between them and freedom. After a brutal and exhausting fight, Sarkhan fell, defeated but not broken, warning that darker dangers lurked beyond his defeat, a threat that would challenge the fragile human and the deadliest beast in ways they could not yet imagine. As silence settled over the ruined fortress and the rebel cries of victory echoed through space, Aiden and Ravok stood side by side, not as prey and predator, but as equals, symbols of hope born from trust and courage. The battle was over, but their journey had only just begun. For the galaxy was wide and wild, and new enemies waited in the shadows, watching the fragile human who had tamed the deadliest beast, and wondering what power he might unlock next. The warlord's fortress lay in ruins behind them, its once mighty walls shattered by the fierce battle that marked the end of Sarkhan's reign. But Aiden and Ravok knew that victory was only the start of something far greater and far more dangerous. The galaxy's dark corners held secrets and threats no one had yet faced, and now, with the fragile human standing tall beside the deadliest beast, a new hope stirred among the scattered and oppressed peoples of countless worlds who had lived in fear for too long. Aiden, once dismissed as weak and fragile, now carried the weight of a legacy forged in fire and loyalty, and Ravok's presence was no longer just a terror, but a symbol of protection and strength. As they traveled from system to system, word of their deeds spread like wildfire. Tales of the man who tamed a monster, the creature who bowed to a human's courage, and the alliance that had shattered tyranny. Everywhere they went, they found those who longed for change, willing to stand with them. And from the ashes of war, a new alliance grew. One built not on fear or power, but on respect, trust, and the promise to defend those who could not defend themselves. Yet even as they rallied forces and forged friendships, shadows deepened in the edges of their vision. Whispers of ancient enemies awakened, of unseen watchers who had watched the warlords fall with cold eyes and colder plans. Aiden and Ravok trained harder, their bond deepening beyond survival into something almost unbreakable, learning from each other's strengths and weaknesses, preparing for the dark days ahead. But the fragile human never forgot his beginnings. The scared boy who once hid in tunnels, overlooked and underestimated, and he vowed to never lose that humility, for it was his greatest strength. As the stars wheeled overhead and new battles loomed, Aidan stood with Ravok at his side, a living legend walking among the stars, ready to face whatever the galaxy would throw at them next, knowing that together they had become more than the sum of their parts, symbols of hope, courage, and the power of trust in a universe that had once believed humans were fragile and weak. And so, a new legacy was born, one that would echo through the ages, reminding all who heard it that even the smallest light can shine brightest in the darkest night.